Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pitts. Ukraine War news update, first part thereof for the 8th of May 2024. I have released yesterday's extra video this morning because I went to the cinema to see Civil War last night and completely fell out of my mind that I had to release that video. It was ready to go and I just forgot to press go. So that's come out this morning. It makes my the schedule for today's output a little bit weird. Anyway, we'll go to the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them in the description to the video below. We can see, first of all, that the Ukrainians have dipped below 1,000 personnel for the second day in about 10 days or 11 days now, I think. So it's been really challenging for the Russians with personnel losses, and actually this has dipped only to 970. So that's not too shabby for the Ukrainians. Still a very attritional period for the Russians, and I think that's reflective of the idea that they are attacking in fairly significant ways in a number of places, and also a few other areas have hit the radar as well. So we've seen activity in the northeastern axis from Kupiansk down to Crimea. That has become a little bit more lively as of late. So a number of places being lively and some big attacks, meaning attritional warfare is taking place. 13 tanks have also been lost over the last day, or damaged or abandoned. 19 armoured personnel vehicles as well, and 30 artillery systems. So some fairly challenging numbers there. 40 vehicles and fuel tanks is fairly standard, and 2 pieces of special equipment, slightly lower in that category, but it's a bit of a wide-reaching category, that one. Anyway, I think that's a good day for the Ukrainians all in all. But of course, the question is always, what do the stats look like for the Ukrainians? And we know that they are suffering along those areas of the front line I've just sort of hinted at. Now, Andrew Perpetua didn't get us the lost stats for yesterday. Not that he got it, as in our paths didn't quite cross at the same time. So this is yesterday's lost list. I don't have today's one. It's not out yet, but I think looking at this will be interesting. You can see already that the Russians have huge losses there at about a ratio of, I guess, 3-1, maybe a little bit higher than 3, maybe almost 4-1 there. So that is exactly what the Ukrainians would want for a day of losses. Of course, I've talked about how these aren't necessarily chronologically tied to the day before. These will be montages that have been released that might have videos that cross, over several weeks or maybe even longer. Let's look at the Ukrainian losses, see what value there is there. There's a multiple launch rocket system that has been damaged by a Lancet. Grad is under a cage and there is a smoking after the strike, but it's unclear whether it is the netting or the Grad smoking. So that might be minor damage to a BM-21 Grad. Then we have a couple of tanks, T-80, T-64. Again, it's worth noting that Lancets are on here in a number of different places. So we've got, 4 or 5 Lancet hits. We are seeing the Lancet being used far more regularly at the moment. Then when we see a couple of infantry fighting vehicles, armoured personnel carriers, FV-103 Spartan abandoned, then hit by night vision FPV drone, a couple of M113s, and then civilian vehicles and a couple of unknown which side they're on, IFVs at the bottom there. But yeah, nothing too crazy lost by the Ukrainians there. And then we come on to the Russian losses, and they are just fairly substantial in terms of mass of equipment. We'll go and look at air defense, and we can see that there's an S-300 launcher or loader and an S-300 launcher as well. So 2 bits of kit destroyed. I must check to see which one that is. That might be from one of those strikes the other night. In fact, the great thing about Andrew Perpetua's stats is you can check them out on the original list here, and next to it will be some URLs that will tell you exactly where those entries have come from. So clicking on that first link, we have this Telegram entry, some pictures there showing a very much burning, destroyed Russian 9A83M2 launcher and 9A85-2 launcher of the 9K81M2's S300 V4 complex in the Zaporizhia region. Zaporizhia region, goodness me, so this could be good news that it's not one of the ones from Jankoy, from elsewhere. This could be a separate S300. So that's incredibly important. The Ukrainians would want to degrade, they are trying to degrade the Russian air defense, I presume ahead of the F-16s being sent to Ukraine. And that is a really valuable hit by the Ukrainians, but I don't know when exactly that was from or what the details are of those hits. So good news there. Some surveillance and comms equipment, engineering vehicle UR-77. That is that the mine throws off those big long lines of explosives to clear a path through a minefield. I think that's a UR-77. I could be wrong. A patrol boat damaged there, some artillery pieces, a number of tanks, T-80s, T-72s, and a T-90M there damaged. I've just seen a video of another T-90M getting blown up that's been abandoned and then blown up. So I don't know whether it is that one or that's a subsequent one. And then, goodness me, look at the list of our infantry fighting vehicles. Lots of BMP 1s and 2s and whatnot. Some BTRs there. A good deal destroyed and abandoned. And then we get on to some APCs, some trucks, a whole load of ATVs, mainly Desert Cross 1000-3. So those are the golf carts that seem to be being used on a much more frequent basis. Here we have an awful lot. That's the most I've seen in a day. Pickup trucks and motorcycles. Lots and lots of varied equipment getting destroyed, and I think that's a sign that the Russians are having to use those vehicles rather than choosing to use those vehicles. I saw a montage the other day of motorcycles getting blown up in attacks, and you're just thinking, I'm fairly sure that's not the optimal vehicle to be using there. Really not protective at all of those troops. And yeah, so I just think this is something that although it won't have all have happened yesterday, when you're looking at the sorts of figures that we've been seeing on a daily basis, this goes to support the high levels of losses, the high rate of attrition that the Russians are experiencing. Here we're going to have I'm not going to look at the whole thread here, just the top line numbers here, but I've talked about how D30s, these old howitzers are being, and D20s and D10s even, are being drawn out of long-term storage. How many of these do they have left? What does this tell you? Well, I think by drawing these out of storage, it tells you that they need barrels. Probably it's not just having a lack of artillery in general due to the artillery pieces getting blown up, but it might also be a lot to do with barrel wear, having to replace those barrels, and it's easier to just pull these out of storage and use these instead of the worn barrel of whatever it is they're replacing, and replacing the barrel wholesale. This is HIMARS, a bit like John P that does these analyses of stockpile numbers. So Russia used the D30 in low numbers before the start of the invasion, with 170 active units. These are older howitzers, so that's unsurprising. Since then, this towed artillery piece has become much more common, and they've lost at least 74 that have been visually confirmed. Here is how many remain in storage. So as usual, there's an overview of the D30 stored at the storage bases, counted from satellite images. As you can see, the images used to count the number of remaining units are often quite old, so the real number is likely much lower. So a lot of these images come from 2023, and therefore the number that he's got here, so they had pre-war 3,191, they've now got 1,179, and that number will be very generous. In other words, these stockpiles are really, really depleted. There are 37% left, which means 63% have been taken out. And of that 37% that are left, that's not probably what is left now, because that'll be from stats from last year. As you can see, the date of these is, look, that's 2022 was the last time that particular base was caught on satellite imagery. 2022 for the 7020 base, 2022, and then May, June 2023. The most recent ones are from December 2023. There's no 2024 footage. So my guess is that 1,179 is significantly lower, as in a lot lower. Now, okay, so some of those bases have 0 now, so they can't get any lower than that. But some of these other ones that haven't been looked at since October 2022, that's a year and a half worth of depletion that would have taken place from there, because already in October 2022 there was 500 less there than there was pre-war, right? So my guess is that there's going to be hardly any T30s left, because also what you're going to find is the ones that will be left will be the least usable ones. They will be taking the best ones at the beginning, and then subsequently they're dipping into worse and worse ones, to the point where if you've only got 37% left, and that's in 2023, then you can bet that those are the poorest 37% of the 100% you did have. The point being that it's not looking good in some of these stockpile analyses for the Russians. But yeah, I think their losses are unsustainable, and it's going to be hurting them. There's no doubt about this. And indeed, it's hurting them because an anecdote like this comes out. So this is a Russian who is operating in Chasiv Yar, and this guy says that he's just received some paperwork to say, so our battalion is located in the Slavic Serbian LPR. For those of you who don't know, I'll explain. It's just a stone's throw from Chasiv Yar, which is very active. This guy's obviously working where the most difficult battles are being fought. And a paper came to our position, by which our heavy equipment must leave to celebrate the Victory Day to the parade. So we've got the May the 9th Victory Day parade tomorrow, and I don't know when this was filmed, but you've got a guy in Chasiv Yar fighting in one of the most one of the heaviest battles taking place presently on the front line, and his equipment has to go to the Victory Day parade in Russia, and he's whinging about that, rightfully so, which shows you that they don't have the equipment back in Russia in order to put on the Victory Day parade. Why they'd be dipping into, assuming that this is true and it's not some kind of psyops, so it could be incorrect, but assuming this is true, that is a really poor reflection on the state of affairs for the Russian equipment at the moment. It is just an anecdote, though, even if it is true. Right, we're just going to look at the Pion 2S7 here. So we've got an image here of a newly destroyed Pion S7 self-propelled 203mm cannon. As said, the crew is dead, 7th of May 2024. Quite a rare loss at this point. 24 Pions have been documented, with the last one in December 2023. I thought I saw the video of this getting taken out the other day, but I can't find it at the moment. It's just worth looking at the Pion. The Ukrainians use a Pion as well. Here it is. It is, as mentioned here, the most powerful Ukrainians, in this case, Ukrainian self-propelled gun. It has a massive barrel, right? 2S7 Pion, and it can fire some 50-something kilometers on a good day. So American aid and ammunition to our defenders is gradually starting to arrive. The American armed forces have been Ukrainian armed forces have been reporting active fighting since this morning, and these are in Pion units that were struggling for ammunition. Them and Panzerhaubitze 2000s in the same sort of units are now firing again. These are massive guns. As Rod Francis here says, the 2S7 Pion is the most powerful conventional gun ever built. Ukraine has about 100, though every year it's harder to find parts or ammo for the ancient beasts. The maximum firing range is 56 kilometers. It's not very accurate, and they can fire only two shots in 60 seconds if it's a very good crew. So there are various sort of images of these Pions being used. These are Ukrainians using them, but the Russians lost a good few dozen of these. And if you just go and put in Russian 2S7 into Twitter, you can actually find some of these images of them getting destroyed. HIMARS taking them out, so it shows that they are quite high value. If you're going to give a HIMARS to that's the one that has a HIMARS. It lands plumb on top of that one. That was back in October 2023. So I can't find visual evidence at the moment. That one I thought, no, it might be this one from April the 7th there. Russian Pion in Kherson region taken out. So anyway, there you can go and find various ones of these getting taken out. It's interesting because last year the Russians declared that they were going to make 5 fully fledged heavy artillery brigades from things like the Pion S2S7, but Defense Express did an article on this in January saying during 1.5 years of war, Russia brought back into service a minimum of 80 2S7 Pion self-propelled howitzers, excluding barrels. This raises a question of whether the Russians have the resources for the planned heavy artillery brigades. And then someone else here looking into the satellite images of these, of the stockpiles of these particular pieces of equipment. Someone here saying, and this is back in from January 2024, but the time lapse is again only to June 2023, so there'll be fewer of these. Almost all of the Pion 2S7 heavy mortar systems stored at the 94th Arsenal in Omsk have been pulled out, and the remaining ones were cannibalized. So again, like every one of these they lose, it is going to be a challenge to replace them, and arguably they just don't have the stockpiles. I mean, the same can be said for the Ukrainians. As mentioned, they're going to be struggling for parts for these. So the idea that they're going to equip 5 new heavy artillery units is possibly wishful thinking on behalf of the Russians there. And if these assumptions are correct, it says, then in fact the Russian army may have in reserve significantly fewer than 260 units of the 2 S7 Pions, as indicated, for example, in the Military Balance 2023 handbook. Accordingly, if the actual number of these large caliber self-propelled artillery units in storage is less than stated, then the question arises as to whether the Russian army really has the resources to create full-fledged five fully fledged artillery brigades, the plan for which the Russians reiterated at the end of 2023. Anyway, I just thought I'd pop into that particular SPG to wonder whether the Russians have large stockpiles of them or not. Right, moving on to distance strikes. It's been a pretty heavy night for the Ukrainians. A lot of attention from the Russians here. So, overnight, Ukraine shot down 39 of 55 Russian missiles and 20 of 21 drones. So the drone success rate is absolutely fantastic there. 20 out of 21 on them, 95.2%. When it comes to the missiles, a varied set of results there. Of the KH-101 cruise missiles, 73.3% of them were shot down, 33 of 45. That means 12 cruise missiles have found their way probably to somewhere near their target. All 4 caliber cruise missiles were shot down. Both the KH-59 or 69 cruise missiles were shot down. 0 out of the 3 of the Iskander-M ballistic missiles were shot down, and 0 out of the 1 Kinzhal missile was shot down. So that's a hypersonic missile, and that's obviously worrying. They will have done damage somewhere. Still don't quite know how much damage was done and to where. We know the energy infrastructure was targeted. Just to give you an idea of actually what the KH-101 and the KH-59 missiles are, the KH-55 or the 101. The 101 is a variant of the KH-55, sometimes called X-55 or X-101, depending on whether it's NATO or Soviet Union or whatnot. Anyway, these are air-launched subsonic cruise missiles, fairly old, 1970s, and have a really long range there, up to 2,500 kilometers. So that's the KH-55, that's the original one. Then the 101 is a stealth development of that, a stealthy replacement to the KH-55 in the late 1990s. It has a conventional warhead, and the missile weighs about 2,200 to 2,400 kilograms. The weight of the warhead is 400 to 450 kilograms, so it's a fairly hefty explosion that's going to deliver. It has a maximum range of 4,500 to 5,500 kilometers. So wow. And a flight profile at altitudes ranging from 30 to 70 meters to 6,000 meters, cruising speed of 190 to 200 meters a second. So, I mean, that thing, there's quite a lot of variability to that, but the main development for the KH-101 is going to be its stealth, as opposed to the KH-55. Now, the KH-59 is a cruise missile with a 2-stage solid fuel propulsion system and a 200-kilometer range, so much smaller range on that. And it has a variant with a bigger warhead and turbojet engine, the KH-59M. And then you have, so that's the KH-59. Then you have the KH-69, which is the stealthy version of the KH-59. So a bit like the 101 is a stealthy version of the 55. The 69 is a stealthy version of the 59. Anyway, I just thought I'd let you know what those missiles are. Right. Approximate route of the missiles and Shaheeds during the attack. So you had a lot of them flying to Kyiv, and then Lviv was targeted. That's where the supersonic Kinzhal missile looks to have hit there, and that one would presume, well, it could either be energy infrastructure or it could well be the military industrial complex. And as you can see, there's 3 different types of missiles found their way to Lviv, and you got Shahed drones hitting Kharkiv, Poltava, Kyiv, a number of different places there, possibly Zaporizhia there, and Kryvyi Rih, so on and so forth. So a variety of targets for those different weapons. Ukraine's energy company says Russia attacked 3 thermal power plants. Quote, equipment has been seriously damaged. We are currently working on eliminating the consequences. This is the 5th massive shelling of the company's energy facilities in the last 1.5 months. And that's DTEK, the private energy concern in Ukraine. So really challenging night for the Ukrainians last night, although I think they've probably done a fairly good job at interception, considering the sheer volume of those missiles and drones that were sent. Be interesting to know what they got shot down with. Consequences of the Russian attack in the Kyiv region, reports the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine. 14 private buildings were destroyed and damaged, 2 people were injured. Of course, they're going to be mainly producing images of private enterprises being hit. They generally don't say, oh, look, here's our thermal power plant that's been blown up and whatnot, generally, at least initially. So there's going to be much more damage to more important things, I think, militarily speaking, than just those private buildings. But there's all sorts. I mean, if you look down the socials, there's all sorts of information filtering out as we speak. As a result of the Russian attack, equipment at one of the power facilities in the central region was damaged. In the Kirovohrad region, a critical infrastructure facility was also damaged. 8-year-old child was injured, 13 private houses, and almost 3 dozen garages were damaged. Power plant was hit in Poltava, preliminary no casualties. In the Vinnytsia region, there are hits on the energy infrastructure facilities in Zaporizhia. Russians also hit critical and civil infrastructure facilities. There is destruction, preliminarily no casualties. In the Kyiv region, a civilian infrastructure facility caught fire due to an attack. So lots going on there, and as I say, information is coming out. Energy facilities in 6 regions were hit. So we'll see what the end result is. Now, for the Ukrainians on the Russians last night, so before all of that attack took place, the Ukrainians hit a Russian oil depot in Luhansk Oblast with an NGM 140 ATACMS missile. By all accounts, that has been geolocated to there. So if you think Donetsk front line is going to go something like that. And yeah, it's quite far back into Luhansk, Donetsk, sort of Luhansk Oblast there. Luhansk comes down behind Donetsk a bit, as you can see. Anyway, so there's some serious fire that was videoed last night. Strike and explosion in Luhansk are reported. Now the area is on fire, about 90 to 110 kilometers from the front line. And there you can see the oil depot that has been hit. Now, this part of the missile debris was then photographed on the ground. That doesn't mean it was shot down. That's what you'd expect from these missiles. So what happens is the front part of it just comes apart and it drops all those bomblets, if it is indeed this variant of the missile, and then they spread out and drop on wherever. Or I don't know if it's a unitary warhead version. So this means the ATACMS missile was not shot down. When a cluster ATACMS missile is about to hit the target, it spins and the propulsion system splits from the payload section, activating a fuse, and 950 M74 bomblets are dispersed over a large area. Russia's claimed Ukraine launched over 50 ATACMS and has claimed to have shot down over 30 of them, but has not yet shown any evidence of a single ATACMS being shot down. So that is the remnants of one of the ATACMS. Certainly the oil depot is on fire, and I say is on fire because apparently it still is burning. That is it this morning. You can see some serious damage to some of those units there as the fire is still going. Oil depot in Luhansk sustained heavy damage. Several oil tanks burned down while others took significant damage. In addition, power lines and a gas pipeline were damaged or destroyed. So hopefully some decent damage done to that piece of infrastructure. Then there were explosions heard, or anti-aircraft fire being heard in Taganrog, which is I guess there was a map here. So Taganrog, so there's the Azov Sea. You've got Crimea just down there. You've got Rostov-on-Don here, and there were explosions heard in Rostov, or at least air defense is active there, and Taganrog is just there. So you've got Mariupol, you've got Berdyansk, Mariupol, then you've got the border with Russia, then you've got Taganrog right on the very northeastern edge of the Sea of Azov, and then you've got Rostov-on-Don. And we heard that Taganrog, so what seems like machine gun fire heard, maybe anti-aircraft missile defense, rumors of Ukraine's modified S-200 missiles being fired. Russians are jittery right now, no proof yet other than those sounds, so don't know if anything's happened. And then the explosions caught on CCTV in Rostov as well, so who knows what, if anything, has been targeted or hit in Russia in those areas. And then another example of friendly fire from the Russians, with another village being hit by Russia's own aerial bombs, the Karb FAB 500 there. That is, Astria reports the latest bungled bombing happened in Krasnodar territory. That's 3 accidental bombings in 4 days. So the Russians really do have a high number of those accidental bombings. Right, just a couple of things to note in the other bits and pieces section. So Bloomberg reporting that Russia uses TikTok content to undermine Ukrainian leadership, according to Kyiv. Quote, Russia is dominating us on TikTok due to the scale of its operation. Andriy Kovalenko, a Ukrainian official focused on countering disinformation, told Bloomberg. The Russians, quote, the Russians have been working systematically on TikTok and are utilizing this platform successfully. I mean, we know how well they operate on Twitter, on Telegram, on YouTube. We all experience trolls. I had to apologize to someone yesterday who I thought was a troll, asking me a question that, if you read it one way, seemed really trollish, but actually, because you can't tell, you're not speaking to people face to face, you just read the words, you can't tell sarcasm. There's a thing, Poe's law, isn't there, where if someone's being satirical, you can very easily mistake it for actual reality, because these days satire and reality are so close. But anyway, I was quite harsh to someone yesterday, and they were like, actually, a Ukraine supporter and a channel supporter, and I feel really bad. Anyway, it's difficult. Sometimes we make mistakes like that. Anyway, the Russians are just very good at using disinformation, very good at using social media platforms. In fact, I was just seeing something earlier on about deepfake videos that they have created, such as Emmanuel Macron, a video that they released of him making some claims about Ukraine, and Zelensky as well. We are moving into new AI territory. We're moving into deep fake territory where, as I've said before, it's an epistemic crisis we're moving into. That is, we are unsure of our epistemic security. Epistemology and philosophy is a study of knowledge and truth. We don't know what is true and what isn't, and that means that we can be very easily manipulated. Anyway, something that does seem to have happened is that a US Army sergeant has been arrested in Russia accused of theft. This is stirred up quite a bit of controversy. A US Army soldier stationed in South Korea has been detained in Russia. The US military says the Russian Foreign Ministry said the charges were not related to politics or espionage, but to a purely domestic crime. Staff Sergeant Gordon Black is accused of stealing personal property. 34-year-old was not on official travel when he was held on May the 2nd in the city of Vladivostok. What the hell is he doing there in Russia's Far East? Sergeant Black had been in the process of changing duty stations from South Korea to Fort Cavazos in the US state of Texas, according to a statement from the US Army. But instead of returning to the US, he traveled through China to Vladivostok for personal reasons. US Army spokesman woman Cynthia Smith said in a statement. According to Russian media, he was visiting a woman with whom he had a romantic relationship. The soldier's mother, Melody Jones, confirmed to CBS that he was in Russia visiting his girlfriend. Please do not torture him or hurt him, Melody Jones said when asked about her message to the Russians. Sergeant Black enlisted as an infantryman in 2008, deployed to Iraq in 2009 and Afghanistan in 2013. Most recently assigned to the 8th Army US Forces career at Camp Humphreys in South Korea. He did not request official clearance, and the Defense Department did not authorize his travel to China or Russia. The US Army said there is no evidence he intended to remain in Russia. So anyway, that's all going on. People are trying to furiously work out who he is. Then videos of him have popped out where he's been saying that he's been denigrating NATO and saying nice things about Russia, possibly because he really likes a Russian girl that, I haven't got the video here. John Ridge says, I'm calling it, he's 100% American moron, 0% Russian plot. In other words, the guy's just a massive fool rather than someone who is doing anything nefarious for the Russians. Just a little bit of info on him from Mark Krutov here. Link in the last post. We found a TikTok videos posted by a Russian woman who identified the Russian serviceman Gordon Black as her, quote, husband. He adored Trump, called NATO aggressive, and finally lost his love and went to Russia to get her back. What could have gone wrong? He watched dozens of videos posted by Vladivostok native Alexandra Vasychuk, including at least one showing Black in his US Army, or we watched US Army fatigues. She refers to Black as my Pindos, a Russian slur word for American. Americans. Looks like Black was an army drill instructor. Most of the videos of the couple together in 2022 and 2023 appeared to have been shot in South Korea, where Vasychuk says on TikTok that she had lived for more than 5 years. Black had also been stationed in South Korea and had been set to return to Texas, but instead traveled to Russia, where he was arrested. Prior to that, they broke up. The two broke up. She even photoshopped him out of her VK profile pic. Ouch. So look at that. Photoshopped out of that. Ooh. In one video, Vasychuk films near Camp Humphreys, the US Army installation around 60 kilometers south of Seoul. There you go. So, and there's another video of him. I've seen none of these ones, but one where he's walking along trying to master a Russian phrase as she's walking with him, which is something like Russia for victory or something like that. I don't know if it's to do with Victory Day as opposed to victory in the war in Ukraine, for example. But nonetheless, either way, it's not cool saying how wonderful and victorious Russia are while they are at war, essentially against an American ally, and Russia are the enemy. And there he is, I presume, at that point, besotted with that girl and falling into all the old Russian narratives. So yeah, it's not cool, and that appears to be an ongoing saga that I'm sure we'll hear more about. He could be very well used for leverage by the Russians, arrested on maybe a trumped-up charge, maybe he has stolen something personal. But either way, the Russians are this is like a gift for the Russians. What a silly man. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you so much for watching. I'm out for most of the day today. I'm not going to get back till later, so I may have time to do my second video. My output's going to be a bit weird. I promised Stella I'm going to do the stats analysis for the general staff figures over the months. It may be that's going to have to come out late today when I get back. Anyway, take care everybody. Speak soon.